The chosen don't chase victory. Victory chases them. They never stood a chance. Not against you. Not against the power behind you. They thought they were fighting you, but they were really fighting the universe itself. And no one wins against the universe. Every move they made against you only made your power stronger, your destiny clearer. They tried to break you, and in doing so, they built you. And yet, you had the audacity to doubt yourself, to think you were alone, to question your own light. How foolish! The war is over. You already won. Now act like it. But before we go deeper, make sure to like and subscribe. When you do, it signals YouTube to push this message to more chosen ones, more warriors who need to wake up. This isn't just content. This is a calling. Spread it. Now let's begin. Welcome, the anointed ones. It's already yours. You just haven't caught up to it yet. Stop for a second. Let that sink in. What if the battle was never about winning, but about remembering? What if you were never trying to prove yourself, but simply trying to recognize what was already decided? Here's something they don't want you to know. The human brain processes 11 million bits of information per second, yet your conscious mind only registers about 50. That means right now, there are victories happening in your name that you don't even see yet. The doors you thought were locked, they were never locked, just waiting for you to step forward. The power you thought you lost, it was never gone, just buried under illusions. But here's the problem. Winning doesn't always feel like winning, and that's why so many of you still act like you're in a fight, still waiting for a sign, still questioning whether you were really chosen. You were programmed to believe that struggle equals progress, that suffering means you're doing something right, that success must be hard. Lies. If struggle was proof of worthiness, then your enemies, who lie, cheat, and manipulate, should be the weakest ones. But look at them, thriving in their illusions, feeding off deception. They don't fight fair, yet you keep playing by rules that were never made for you. You think just because you're chosen, things should be easy. No. The universe chose you because you can handle what others cannot. And that's exactly why they fear you. Your very existence is a threat. The power of being chosen haunts your enemies in ways you will never fully understand. Your presence is a mirror that forces them to see their own lack. They know they can't touch your destiny, so they try to distract you from it. They can't steal your power, so they try to convince you it was never real. They can't stop your rise, so they try to exhaust you before you reach the top. And still, you rise. The truth is, the hardest part is already behind you. The suffering was never proof that you were failing. It was proof that you were becoming. Every loss, every betrayal, every night you questioned if you could keep going, it all led here. And here is where you remember. You were never the underdog. You were never the outsider. You were never in danger of losing. You were simply waiting for the moment when the universe would move, when the energy that has always been yours would finally be undeniable. That moment is now. So step into it and don't look back. So, are you ready to step into what's already yours? If you've truly felt the shift, drop the number 77 in the comments. It's the number of infinite abundance, a signal that you're aligned with your victory. Stay locked in, because what comes next will change how you see everything. Let's begin. Number 1, they wanted you to be another ghost in the machine, but you burned the whole system down. They never feared your struggle. They feared your awakening. They thought you would follow the script, wake up, obey, conform, shrink. They expected you to play your part, like another faceless piece in their lifeless machine. But you didn't just step out of line. You ripped the entire blueprint to shreds. And that's why they hate you. That's why they fought you. Not because you were weak, not because you were lost, but because the moment you questioned the system, you became bigger than it. You stopped feeding the illusion. You stopped bowing to a structure that was never built for you in the first place. And that made you dangerous. The world doesn't fight those who are powerless. It ignores them. It only fights those who threaten the balance. You weren't supposed to wake up. You weren't supposed to see past the smoke and mirrors. You were supposed to live and die in quiet obedience, just like them. But instead, you remembered. You remembered that you were never meant to beg for a seat at their table, that you were never meant to follow a path designed to keep you small, that you were always meant to take what's already yours. And yet, after all of that, you still dared to doubt yourself. You still thought maybe you weren't strong enough, maybe you weren't chosen, maybe you were wrong for seeing what others refused to. Stop. Do you really think the universe would put this much fire inside of you for no reason? That it would align itself to pull you out of mediocrity only to abandon you? That all the resistance, all the sleepless nights, all the battles were just for nothing? No, the power of being chosen is not an accident. It's a force that disrupts, that dismantles, that bends reality itself. A force that haunts your enemies because it reminds them of their own insignificance. Because that's the real reason they hate you, isn't it? Not because of what you've done, but because of what you represent. You are a walking contradiction to everything they were told to believe. You are proof that the game was rigged, that the world they settled for was never real, that they were never powerless, just willing prisoners. So of course, they tried to break you. Of course, they tried to convince you that you were the problem, that you were lost, that you were wrong. They needed you to believe that, because the alternative was too terrifying for them to face. That you were right the entire time. That's why the battle was never about proving yourself. It was never about earning your place. The real fight was always about whether you would accept the false reality handed to you or claim the truth that was always yours. And guess what? You already made that choice. That's why the struggle was so intense. That's why you felt alone. That's why everything seemed harder for you than for those around you. Because you weren't wired for mediocrity. You weren't built to be another shadow in the crowd. You were born to break the cycle. And breaking the cycle means facing resistance. You need to understand this now. Every attack you faced was a response to your power, not a reflection of your weakness. They weren't fighting you. They were fighting what you stood for. You were never the one in danger. The system was. So stop questioning your path. Stop wondering if you belong here. Stop thinking you have to grind yourself into the ground to prove you deserve what's already in motion. The hardest part is already over. You've broken free. You might not have all the answers yet. You might still feel like you're standing in the middle of the unknown. But here's the truth. You don't need all the answers. The system you were in was never built to give them to you. Because you're not playing their game anymore. You're playing your own. And in your game, you already won before they even knew the rules. Number 2, they didn't just oppose you. They confessed their defeat before the war even started. They never hated you. They hated the way the universe moved for you. They weren't just enemies. They weren't just obstacles. They were proof. Proof that you were never meant to be ordinary. Proof that your presence alone was enough to shake their fragile world. If you had been just another shadow in the crowd, they would have ignored you. If you had been predictable, controllable, forgettable, they wouldn't have cared. But they did care, didn't they? They watched you, talked about you, plotted against you. They threw everything they had at you, not because you were weak, but because they knew you were something else entirely. And that was their confession. They saw your power before you did. They sensed your difference before you even understood it yourself. And instead of facing the truth that they would never be like you, they chose the coward's path. They tried to drag you down. You were never just another person to them. You were a disruption. Your existence alone made them uncomfortable. Your presence forced them to see what they lacked. Every time you walked into a room, you reminded them that they had settled, that they had conformed, that they had accepted a life they never truly wanted. You don't waste energy on something that doesn't matter. You don't attack something that isn't a threat. They opposed you because you were always ahead of them. And yet, you still questioned yourself. You thought maybe they were right. Maybe you were too much. Maybe you should dim your light, hold back, explain yourself. No. Stop thinking their resistance means you need to fight for their approval. That's the trap. The moment you explain yourself, the moment you seek validation, the moment you lower yourself to be understood by those who will never see past their own insecurities, you lose. Because the real victory, it was never in proving them wrong. It was in realizing they had already admitted you were right. Some of them tried to make you feel small because they sensed your greatness before you did. Some tried to block your path because they knew you were headed somewhere they could never reach. And the worst ones, the ones who smiled to your face but secretly hoped for your failure, they knew you were unstoppable, and that terrified them. Because deep down, they knew you weren't like them. You never needed their approval. You never needed them to believe in you, because their opposition was never about you. It was about them, their fears, their limits, their regrets. And once you understand that, you will never doubt yourself again, because the moment they made you their problem, you had already won. Number 3, you didn't just learn the game, you became the rule they can't break. They studied the path, you became the road. Most people collect lessons like trophies, stacking up knowledge but never using it. They read the books, take the courses, repeat the same mistakes, hoping one day everything will click. But you didn't just learn, you became the lesson. Your existence, your journey, your survival, those are the lessons. While they're still searching for the meaning of resilience, you embody it. While they talk about transformation, you live it. That's the difference. They understand concepts. You are the concept. And that's what makes you dangerous. People love to analyze success stories from a distance. They want a formula, a blueprint, a shortcut. But true power doesn't come from studying the journey. It comes from becoming it. And that's exactly what you did. You didn't just go through hardship. You let it rebuild you from the ground up. Every betrayal, every setback, every loss didn't just teach you a lesson. It rewired you. You don't think like you used to. You don't move like you used to. You don't hesitate like you used to. And that's why they don't know what to do with you. Some watch you and feel inspired. Others watch you and feel exposed. Because standing next to you, they realize how much they've avoided, how much they've resisted change, how much they've chosen comfort over growth. And when someone sees in you what they refuse to see in themselves, they either admire you or fear you. That's why some people resent you, even if you've done nothing to them. That's why they try to discredit you, even if they secretly wish they had your strength. Because you are the mirror they can't look away from. You remind them of everything they could be, but aren't willing to become. And yet, after all this, you still wonder if you're on the right path. You still think you need to explain yourself, to prove yourself. No, there's nothing to prove, nothing to explain, because the proof isn't in your words, It's in how you move, in how you carry yourself, in the fact that no matter what tried to break you, you never folded. People spend years reading about strength, but standing next to you for 5 minutes, that will teach them more than any book ever could. Because you're not just someone who survived, you became the lesson itself. And the moment you became the proof, you won. No need to convince anyone, no need to justify your journey. Because while others are still searching for answers, you became one. And that's something no one can ever take away. Number 4, fear was never yours. They just tried to make it your cage. They lived in fear. You walked through it. That's why they'll never be you. Fear didn't come from you. It was given to you, handed down like a curse from people who never questioned it. Society whispered it in your ear. Teachers engraved it into your mind. Parents, trying to protect you, unknowingly passed it down. They called it caution. They called it realism. They called it wisdom. But it was always a leash. A leash designed to keep you from running too far, from thinking too big, from becoming too much. It was never about keeping you safe. It was about keeping you small. And for a while, you carried it, like a weight you didn't even know wasn't yours. You measured your steps. You second-guessed your moves. You asked for permission when none was needed. But then you woke up. And the moment you stopped carrying their fear, you became unstoppable. Because that's the secret they never wanted you to figure out. Fear was never a wall. It was an illusion, a mirage built from their own limitations, a story told so many times that it felt real. But the second you questioned it, the second you looked it in the eye instead of running from it, it shattered. And that's why they fear you now. Because you don't play by their rules. Because you don't flinch at the things that keep them paralyzed. Because you don't see limits, you see through them. And that makes you a problem. People who are still trapped in fear don't know what to do with someone who isn't. They call you reckless, arrogant, unrealistic. They throw doubt at you, hoping it sticks. They need you to be afraid, because if you're not, it forces them to ask a question they don't want to face. What if fear was never real? What if they wasted their entire lives kneeling before a ghost? That's why your existence alone is disruptive. That's why your presence makes people uncomfortable, because you, just by being you, remind them of what they could have been if they had just let go. And you want to know the real proof that you've already won. Look back. Look at everything you've been through. Look at the moments you thought you wouldn't survive. And yet, here you are, stronger, wiser, untouchable. Fear didn't keep you safe. Fear didn't protect you. It was just one more thing you had to unlearn. And now that you have, now that you see it for what it always was, there's no going back, because while they are still carrying fear, you dropped it and kept walking, and that's why they will never be you. Number 5, you stopped knocking on doors. Now they open themselves. The moment you stopped asking, the world started answering. There was a time when you waited for permission, waited for recognition, waited for someone, anyone, to validate what you already knew deep down. You thought power had to be given, that someone else had to see you, choose you, anoint you. That was the lie. Because power, it's never given, it's claimed. And the day you realized that, the day you stopped begging for a place at the table and became the table, everything changed. You stopped knocking on doors that weren't meant for you. You stopped seeking approval from people who were never qualified to judge you. You stopped explaining yourself to those who were committed to misunderstanding you. And when you did, the same people who ignored you started watching you. The same ones who overlooked you started wondering how you became untouchable, and the same world that once seemed deaf to your voice suddenly started listening. Because now you don't need recognition. You are the recognition. People feel your presence before you speak. They sense your energy before you enter the room. They don't know why, but they know they can't ignore you. That's the shift. You went from waiting to walking, from seeking to attracting, from asking to owning. And that's why you already won. Because true victory isn't about being seen. It's about knowing that whether they see you or not, you are undeniable. Think about it. The greatest forces in the universe don't ask for recognition. The sun doesn't beg to be noticed, it just shines. The ocean doesn't request respect. It simply moves, and everything adjusts around it. That's the power you've stepped into. You no longer chase. You no longer explain. You no longer wait. Because now, you are the source. And that is something no one can take from you. Number 6. They threw fire at you, and you walked out unburned. They thought pressure would break you. Instead, it turned you into something unshakable. Life didn't go easy on you. It came for you with everything it had. The losses, the betrayals, the moments you thought you wouldn't make it. Those weren't just obstacles, they were tests. And while others folded, collapsed, and surrendered under half the weight you carried, you didn't. That's what they don't understand. Your strength isn't in how you thrive when things are easy. It's in how you refuse to break when everything tried to destroy you. They expected you to crumble. They watched, waiting for the moment you would give up, the moment you would let the pain swallow you whole. But you didn't. You bled, but you kept moving. You struggled, but you never stopped. You doubted, but you never backed down. And that's what separates you from the rest. Most people don't know what it's like to be tested the way you were. They live soft, easy lives, mistaking comfort for success, mistaking routine for strength. But you didn't have that luxury. You weren't given a straight path, a helping hand, or a safety net. You were thrown into the fire and told to survive. And you did more than survive. You became something untouchable. That's why nothing scares you anymore. That's why you don't react the way they do. While they panic at the first sign of struggle, you remain steady, because you've already faced worse. You've already walked through storms they wouldn't last a day in. You didn't just survive hardship, you made it your training ground. And now, you move differently. You see differently. You are different. And that's exactly why they can't understand you. They ask why you don't break down like they do, why you don't seek validation like they do, why you don't hesitate like they do. The answer? Because you've already been through hell, and once you've faced the worst, nothing else compares. People fear pain. You learn to use it. People collapse under pressure. You turn it into power. That's the truth of being chosen. You weren't just tested, you were transformed. And that's why you already won. Because no matter what life throws at you next, you will not fold. Number 7, you didn't just heal, you became untouchable. They thought they broke you. They didn't realize you were becoming someone they could never reach. Most people treat healing like a reset button. They think if they just patch themselves up enough, they can return to who they were before the pain. But you understood something deeper. There was no going back. Because the version of you that got hurt no longer exists. You didn't just recover, you transcended. You didn't just put the pieces back together, You became something new, something stronger, wiser, and untouchable in ways they never saw coming. And that's why you've already won. The things that used to break you, they don't even touch you now. The wounds that once defined you, they're not scars anymore, they're armor. You didn't just heal, you outgrew the wound itself. And that's something most people will never do. Because real healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about evolving past the version of you that could be hurt like that in the first place. Most people spend their entire lives in a cycle of pain and repair. They heal just enough to keep going, just enough to function, just enough to survive. But the moment another storm hits, they fall apart all over again. Because deep down, they never really changed. They just put a fresh coat of paint over their broken foundation. But you rewired yourself from the inside out. And that's why nothing feels the same anymore. The old triggers don't work. The same tactics don't shake you. You no longer react. You observe. You no longer break. You adapt. They can't hurt you the way they used to. Not because they stopped trying, but because you're not the same person they once had access to. And that terrifies them. Because the moment they realize they couldn't control you, couldn't manipulate you, couldn't pull you back into old patterns, that was the moment they lost all their power over you. You didn't just heal, you became bigger than the pain itself. And that's why you've already won. No one can use your past against you anymore. No one can make you bleed from wounds that no longer exist. The old you was breakable, the new you unreachable. And now there's nothing left to go back to. Because while others are still trying to recover, still trying to make sense of their suffering, still trying to hold on to the past version of themselves, you've already outgrown it all. And that's something they'll never understand. Number 8. They shouted their doubts. You answered in silence. Doubt screams, results whisper, and nothing is louder than a silent victory. They laughed. They doubted. They whispered behind your back and smirked to your face. They thought they had you figured out, thought you would fail, thought you were delusional, thought you were just another dreamer who would crumble under reality. But while they wasted breath, you built something real. You didn't argue. You didn't beg them to see your vision. You didn't waste energy explaining yourself to people who had already made up their minds. You let them talk, and then you let your results shut them up. Now look at them. The same ones who mocked you. They're watching you in silence. The same ones who swore you wouldn't make it. They're studying your every move. The same ones who underestimated you. They're pretending they never doubted you in the first place. That's power beyond explanation. Doubt is always loud. Mockery is always loud. Weak minds use noise to mask their own fear. Because deep down, they never hated you. They hated what you represented. You were proof that they could have tried harder, that they could have risked more, that they could have broken free just like you did. But they didn't. And instead of facing that truth, they tried to convince themselves that you wouldn't make it either. Because if you failed, they could stay comfortable. If you failed, they wouldn't have to question their own limitations. But you didn't fail. You became the proof they feared. And now, they have nothing left to say. They wanted a reaction. They wanted you to break, to lash out, to beg for their approval. But instead, you just kept moving, kept building, kept rising. And now, your silence haunts them. Because the truth is, people don't recover from being proven wrong by the very person they dismissed. They don't forget the times they laughed at you, only to watch you pass them by. And yet, after everything, you still feel like you need to prove something. No, You don't need to explain how you did it. You don't need to remind them of what they said. You don't need an apology, recognition, or validation, because the real win is knowing that they know, knowing that every time they see your name, your success, your presence, it reminds them of what they refuse to believe. And that's louder than any doubt they ever had. You don't need words, because you are the answer. Number 9, they thought you lost, but you were just making room for what was always yours. The chosen never lose. They just release what was never meant to keep up with them. They watched you walk away and thought you were defeated. They saw things slip from your hands and assumed you were left with nothing. They thought the losses broke you, shattered you, reduced you, but they never understood what was really happening, because you never actually lost. The real illusion wasn't your victory. It was the idea that you ever needed to hold on to what was never truly yours. You see, most people mourn loss because they don't understand power. They cling to things, people, situations, afraid that if they let go, they will be left empty. They measure their worth by what they can keep, not realizing that true strength comes from knowing what to release. But you let it go. You didn't just survive loss, you saw through it. You realized that nothing real, nothing truly meant for you, could ever be taken away. If it left, it wasn't yours. If it walked away, it was never part of your destiny. And that's why you won. Most people stay trapped in the illusion of loss. They grieve things that were never meant to last. They hold on to the dead weight of people, places, and circumstances that were only meant to be temporary. They think losing something means they have failed, when in reality, the only failure is refusing to let go of what no longer belongs. But you embraced the clearing. You understood that every ending was a recalibration, that when the universe removes something, it's only because it's making space for something greater. And that terrified them, because they were waiting for you to break. They were waiting for you to beg, to crawl back, to regret. But instead, you thrived. You didn't just accept loss, you used it. You turned it into fuel, into freedom, into fire, while they were still stuck in the illusion, grieving over things they were never meant to keep. You stepped fully into your destiny. And that's the real difference between you and them. They see loss as the end. You see it as a doorway. They see absence as defeat. You see it as alignment. They count what they've lost. You recognize what you've gained. And that's why no matter how much they tried to take from you, you never truly lost. Because what's meant for you, it was always yours. And what left, it was never part of your victory to begin with. Number 10, you saw through the illusion, and that's why they fear you. The greatest threat to a system built on lies is someone who refuses to believe them. They needed you to stay blind. They needed you to follow orders, to obey without question, to keep your head down and live a life that never truly belonged to you. They built a world designed to keep people in line, and you shattered it just by seeing the truth. Most people accept the script they're handed without even realizing it's a trap. Work, obey, conform, repeat. They call it security, but it's just a cage with invisible bars. They call it the right way, but it's just a path leading nowhere. And yet, they love that cage. They defend it. They cling to it, because stepping outside of it would mean admitting they were lied to their entire lives. But you weren't afraid to question it. You stopped following their rules. You made your own moves. You rewrote the game entirely, and that made you powerful. But more than that, it made you dangerous. Because when one person breaks free, they create a crack in the illusion. And a single crack, that's all it takes to make the whole thing collapse. That's why they tried so hard to stop you. They told you you were wrong. They tried to make you doubt yourself. They made you feel like the outsider, the crazy one, the rebel. But here's the truth. You weren't rebelling against reality. You were rebelling against a lie. And they knew it. Because deep down, they felt the same thing you did. The difference? You were brave enough to act on it. You were willing to step into the unknown while they clung to the comfort of their illusions. That's why they tried to silence you. That's why they tried to make you question your own clarity. Because if you kept going, others would start to see it too. And if enough people woke up, the whole system would fall apart. So they did everything they could to pull you back in. They tried to scare you. They tried to shame you. They tried to make you believe you needed their approval, their permission, their validation. But they failed. Because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. And that means you already won. You're no longer trapped. You're no longer following rules made to keep you powerless. You're no longer bound by the same limits as everyone else. And that's why they'll never be able to control you again. Because now, you don't just see through the illusion. You became the reason it's falling apart. Number 11. They thought breaking you was an option, but you became the storm they can't escape. Survival is for those who still fear loss. You don't fear anything anymore. Most people survive and call it victory. They think getting through the storm is enough. They crawl out of the fire, still shaking, still uncertain, still begging for the world to be kind to them. But you walked through the flames and became fire itself. You didn't just survive. You became untouchable. There was a time when their words got to you, when their doubt made you second-guess yourself, when their rejection, their betrayal, their cheap attempts to break you actually hurt. Not anymore. Because now, there is nothing left in you for them to wound. That's the difference. Most people endure hardship, but they come out of it weaker, more afraid, more desperate for validation. They let survival turn them into a shell of themselves, small, cautious, easy to control. But you let survival turn you into something else entirely. You became unshakable, not just resilient, not just tough, but immune to the things that used to break you. You no longer seek approval. You no longer react to their games. You no longer hesitate when it's time to move. You dictate. That's not just winning, that's domination. They can't play with your emotions anymore because you don't give them access. They can't manipulate you because you see through every lie before it's even spoken. They can't stop your rise because you're not climbing their ladder. You're building your own throne. And the best part? They know they lost. They know they can't reach you anymore. They know the buttons they used to press don't work on you now. And that eats them alive, because their greatest power was never their strength. It was your reactions. And now that you've taken that away, they have nothing left. They will try, of course. The desperate always do. They will throw their best shots, hoping something still lands. They will spread lies, hoping you care. They will test your limits, praying you react. But they don't realize that the old you doesn't exist anymore. The one who doubted, gone. The one who needed their approval, dead. The one who played by their rules, buried. You don't need revenge. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to prove a thing, because what's untouchable cannot be stopped. And you are the storm now. Number 12. You were the storm. They laughed at until it was too late to run. They prepared for everything except you. People love predictability. It makes them feel safe. They categorize, they assume, they decide who you are before you even open your mouth. And they did the same to you. They thought they had you figured out. They placed their limits on you, convinced you would never exceed them. They expected you to play small, to hesitate, to doubt yourself, because that's what they would have done. But while they were busy underestimating you, you were transforming. And now, they don't know what to do with you. You became the storm they never saw coming. They thought you were manageable, containable, predictable, but you weren't moving according to their rules. You weren't following their timeline. While they were watching you, waiting for signs of weakness, waiting for you to break, you were evolving. And when they finally realized what was happening, it was already too late. That's the thing about storms. By the time you see them, by the time you understand what's coming, you're already in the middle of it. And you didn't just survive the storm, you became it. Now they scramble. Now they watch in disbelief. Because this isn't what they planned for. This isn't the version of you they thought they could control. And yet, after all this, you still wonder if you're where you're supposed to be. Look around. Look at how they react to you now. Look at the way they try to adjust, try to regain control, try to figure out how to stop something that has already arrived. They can't stop you, because they never prepared for you. They prepared for someone weaker. They planned for someone predictable. They assumed you would stay the same. They were wrong. And now they don't know what to do with the force you've become. That's why they whisper. That's why they watch. That's why they try to convince themselves that you're still the person they once knew. Because the truth is too terrifying for them to face. They don't fear what they understand. They fear what they can't predict. And you are no longer something they can predict. They had their chance to prepare for you. They wasted it. Now, all they can do is watch the storm move and pray it doesn't destroy everything they built. But you've already won, because you were never the one in danger. They were. Number 13. What broke them built you, and that's why they'll never understand you. The fire that burned them down was the same fire that forged you. Most people let pain write their story for them. They take their suffering and wear it like a name tag: victim, broken, unlucky. They let their past define them, control them, haunt them. But you did what they couldn't. You didn't just survive your pain. You made peace with it. You looked it in the eye, took everything it had to offer, and walked away stronger. And that's why they don't understand you. They wonder why you're not bitter, why you don't crumble under the weight of what you've been through, why you're not looking for pity, not searching for revenge, not stuck in the endless loop of why me, like they are. It's because you already won. The things that broke them were the same things that built you. The betrayal, the loss, the abandonment, those were the lessons that shaped you into something unshakable. They expected you to drown, but instead, you became the tide. And now they don't know what to do with you, because people know how to handle the broken. They know how to pity the ones who stay down, who complain, who cling to the pain as an excuse. But they don't know how to handle someone like you, someone who took the weight of the past and refused to let it define them, someone who walks into a room without the chains that were meant to hold them down, someone who turned every scar into armor. That's why some resent you. It's not just that you survived, it's that you're free. While they're still haunted by what happened to them, you've already moved forward. They see you standing in your power, and it forces them to ask themselves, why am I still stuck? And that's a question most people aren't ready to answer. So instead, they tell themselves that you were just lucky, that you had it easier, that you're faking it, because the truth, that they had the same chance to rise but chose to stay down, is too much for them to face. But their story is not your concern. You don't owe them an explanation. You don't need them to understand. Because the moment you stopped letting your pain define you, you won. No more explaining, no more justifying, no more looking back. Because while they're still trapped in their past, you became something they'll never be: free. Number 14. You saw the checkmate before they even knew they were playing. They were still setting up the board while you were sealing the victory. Most people react to life. They wait for signs, for validation, for proof before they dare to believe. They hesitate, second-guess, stall, waiting for someone to tell them it's safe to move forward. But you didn't need proof. You were the proof. You walked with certainty before the path even appeared. You moved like the victory was already yours, because it was. While they were still debating their next move, you had already played the whole game in your mind and seen the checkmate. That's why they never saw you coming. While they were waiting for permission, you were already in motion. While they were stuck in fear, you were setting things in place. And by the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. That's what separates the chosen from the ordinary. Most people don't believe something is real until they can touch it. You believed it into existence. They needed proof before they could have faith. You had faith first, and the proof followed. That's why things shifted for you in ways they couldn't understand. Because this was never a gamble for you. It was never about hoping things would work out. You knew. And that kind of certainty, that kind of unshakable belief, it bends reality. It rewrites the future before it even arrives. It makes the impossible fold beneath your feet. That's why you move differently. That's why you didn't flinch when things got rough. That's why you didn't hesitate when others were paralyzed by doubt. Because you weren't playing to win. You were playing from a position of victory. And they never understood that. They thought you were just lucky. Thought you had some unfair advantage. But the truth is, they could have done the same if they had the courage to trust in what they couldn't see. But they never did. They never will. Because most people will always need evidence before belief. And by the time they get that evidence, it's already too late. And that's exactly why they lost before they even knew the game had started. Because by the time they realized what was happening, you had already won. Number 15. You were always 10 steps ahead. They just didn't see it yet. They laughed at the storm, not realizing you controlled the weather. Most people move through life blind. They react, they guess, they follow the crowd. They think they're making choices, but really, they're just waiting for someone to tell them what's possible, waiting for approval, waiting for proof before they dare to believe in something greater. But you never waited. You saw beyond the moment. You moved with precision while they were still figuring out the rules. You were always 10 steps ahead. That's why they never understood you. You made decisions that confused them. You walked away from things they would have clung to. You pursued paths they thought were impossible. They mocked you, doubted you, whispered behind your back, because to them, you looked reckless. But what they didn't realize, you had already seen how it would end. You weren't making blind moves, you were making calculated ones. While they were stuck in small thinking, trapped in temporary emotions, you were building a future they couldn't even comprehend yet. And now they're starting to see. Now they're realizing the things they thought were random weren't random at all. Now they're watching the very choices they mocked unfold into something undeniable. Now they're trying to figure out how you always seem to be ahead, how you always seem to know before everyone else does. But here's the truth, they'll never figure it out. Because what gave you the edge wasn't luck. It wasn't chance. It was vision. You knew the distractions were traps before they even became distractions. You knew certain people weren't meant to walk with you before they revealed their true colors. You knew when to move, when to stay silent, when to shift directions, not because of what was in front of you, but because of what was beyond it. That's what made you untouchable. They thought they could play games with you, not realizing you had already played out every possible move in your mind. They thought they could manipulate you, not understanding you saw their intentions before they even spoke. They thought they were competing with you, when in reality, you were never even playing the same game. That's why they were always late, always shocked, always confused by the way you move. They thought they were catching up to you, when in reality, you were already gone. And that's what frustrates them the most. They can't predict you, they can't control you, they can't understand how, no matter what obstacles they place in your way, you keep moving like you already know what's coming next. Because you do. You're not just living in the moment, you're creating the moments before they even arrive. And that's why they'll never keep up. They could study you for years, analyze your every move, try to copy your steps, and they would still always be behind. Because by the time they finally see what's happening, you're already 10 steps ahead. And now you see it clearly. You were never behind. You were never lost. You were never in danger of losing. You were always ahead. The struggles, the doubts, the resistance, they weren't signs of failure. They were proof of your position. While they were waiting for clarity, you were already moving in certainty. While they hesitated, you executed. And now it's undeniable. You won before they even knew the game had started. If this message hit home, like, subscribe, and drop 77 in the comments as a sign you've stepped into your victory. Share this with another chosen one.